Perfect. Thanks, guys. So just want to thank everybody for joining us. This is our fourth of six that we have planned currently. So thank you again for joining us this afternoon. Just a brief kind of overview of what we're going to be doing. Claire is going to speak first, and she's going to talk about the club communications plan, specifically to the club response plan that's in the return to play protocols. But she'll also, a lot of the stuff will be pertinent for years to come. So it's more just general communications plan. And then I will be speaking afterwards on that resource that we released this week, the policies and procedures resource, and talking about working that into your yearly plan for this year. So yeah, I'm going to pass it over to Claire and she'll start us off.
Awesome, thanks, Melissa. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen with all of you. Okay, awesome. So as Melissa said, talking today about communication plans for clubs and skating schools, and most specifically for this COVID-19 world that we are now living in. I think communication right now is huge in terms of any organization. So hopefully this can give you a little bit of insight and help to your club skating school as you guys are planning forward. So just next slide here. Okay, so what we'll cover today, 3 C's of communication, the 10-step communication plan for COVID-19, a couple key takeaways, and then questions. As always, feel free to ask questions whenever that comes up. So just kind of wanted to give a little background of communications, 3 C's. So we've got clear, concise, and consistent. So this, oops, sorry, figuring out my screen here. Okay, so first one is clear. So just make sure that what you were saying cannot be wrongly interpreted. Being clear as direct as possible when communicating your message. A good idea is to create maybe a few key messages from what you are trying to get out. And also proofread for errors. An error-filled message can also lose its credibility. So you just want to make sure that everything is clear. The second one, concise. In today's busy world, people are constantly reading articles they find online, news articles, social media, all that kind of good stuff. So keep your message concise and nice and tight. The longer your message is, the more up you might be losing people that way. So, and then the third one is consistency. So consistent messaging, very important. So for example, if an email sent from one of your staff is maybe conveying a different message than what you've posted online, that's going to confuse people, and people won't really know what's going on. So just the 3 C's, just to kind of get us going. So next, moving on to the COVID-19 communications plan. So this is actually what it looks like in our return to play document. I'm sure you've all been familiar with that. It's posted up on our website. And this is actually the very last page of it. So if you flip all the way to the back of it, it's listing out all the steps. So I'll just kind of go over each step and maybe give you little tricks for each one. So the first one, ensure up-to-date contact information for all members is on file. This is very important, just to make sure everyone's receiving the message. And a good place to start for this is what we've been using a little bit with Skate Ontario is Google Forms. It allows you to create free online surveys. So you can include as many information that you want, name, email, address, phone number, all that good stuff. And then once you have that all back from everybody, you can just easily export it into an Excel file. Always ensure that it's saved in a secure place. Just remember that contact information is confidential, unless they have consented to have you share that. Number 2, determine the best way to distribute information. So This depends both on the nature and the audience of the message. Internal versus external can also play a factor as well. And then depending on your audience, you'd want to communicate differently, maybe with a group of young skaters than you would with a board member. So just keeping in mind who you're talking to and what they'll understand. And then just for an example, I know for us, for our very important urgent messages, we try and put that on everything that we can. eBlast, posted to our website, social media channels, and we've also done a few live town halls, which I'll touch on a little bit. And then more targeted messages can go towards smaller group, can be sent out by email directly from that contact individual. It's a very good way to personalize a message and also build rapport with who you're communicating to. The third one, determine the responsibility for communication within the club skating school during this return to play stages. So this could be either your staff, volunteer, COVID-19 Inside Group. Just as a reminder, the COVID-19 Insight Group is a group of individuals designated to oversee the implementation of the health and safety guidelines of return to play that us as an organization and you as a club and skating school would put in place. Also good for this group to know the return to plays inside and out, as they're going to be the contact for anyone who's maybe sick or unwell. And it's just very important to know like who is managing what is predetermined. So this can help eliminate overlap and duplication, ensure there are no loopholes and that nothing's being missed. So this one's just good, plan ahead, know who is doing what. Next one, number 4, establish consistent cadence of communication to maintain connection with club and skating school members during return to play. So this is good just to keep your group informed as they will know communication is coming. And how frequently you want to connect depends on the communication needs of your club or skating school. It's just good to have that consistent approach so that even if there is no update, you can go on and say today our update is we have no update, but at least they're not looking for things they may have missed. All right, number 5, consider holding a virtual town hall webinar to deliver information on return to play protocols and answer any concerns. So this has been a really important tool for us. As you all know, there's many updates and announcements that can be open to interpretation right now, especially with all the information going around. So we've used this for our major updates just to ensure that the proper message is getting out. And then it's also great that it allows for people to ask questions, that two-way conversation. That way there's less confusion. And anyone with a Facebook account can hold a Facebook Live, which is great. It automatically gets saved to your Facebook page for future reference. And then again, as I said, it encourages engagement and input, which is great, especially at a time right now. Number 6, consider where communication documents can be stored on website or social media for future reference, just to make sure that it's an accessible and consistent place. The last thing you want is people searching around for information. So just making sure that this is all in one place and that people can easily find it. 7, designate member of the COVID-19 oversight group to follow up with any individuals who become unwell with symptoms of COVID-19 during skating activities. So this will eliminate that individual being bombarded by multiple people. If they are exhibiting symptoms, they're probably dealing with a lot mentally and physically. So you keep it to that one person. They can be the contact for that. And then it also allows for effective record keeping moving forward. Just having that one designated person to do that. Number 8, determine paper or virtual storage location for daily session participation tracking sheets. So that is what is on the right there of the screen. This is also, you may also find this in our Return to Play page on our website. And this is important that this is filled out for each session, just to facilitate the contact tracing in the event of a COVID-19 exposure. Just determining where these will live, because this is very important should anything happen. This is just a big safety piece. Number 9, if it is determined that a club skating school member is tested positive, inform all members that may have been in close contact with that individual. So that's where that daily questionnaire comes into play here. And just have a designated person contact each individual as soon as possible. Also a good idea to contact local public health unit to help. They will help you direct you through the process for your own organization, as each health unit across the province has different number of cases, different protocols to deal with these and everything going on. And lastly, number 10, ensure the facility and Skate Ontario are informed as well. Just cover all your bases, inform everyone. Please let us know. This has just helped to ensure safety of all members. So just a few key takeaways from that. So at the beginning, I said clear, consistent, and concise are key, and especially with this new changing and the serious nature of COVID-19, you just want to make sure that everything's getting out consistently, and that the message and what you're saying is correct. Determine your audience. This will help dictate the tone of voice and how the message is communicated. Determine roles and responsibilities, I think, is one of the biggest things here. Just having that plan in place and having individuals knowing what their role is and how they're going to go about doing that. So yeah, that's kind of the end of that. If anybody has any questions, obviously if they're not in the chat box, but please feel free to contact me. My email is there, cbeauchamp@skateontario.org.
Awesome. Thank you, Claire. And Melissa's going to take us into policies.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Thanks. So during this time, operations are going to be potentially a little bit different. So this is actually a really good year for you guys to be focusing and taking a look at your current policies and procedures that you have at your club, and see what can be updated to reflect, maybe something's changed at the club, if there's any legislative changes, anything like that. Or you can also identify areas within your club where you may have a hole, where you don't have a policy to cover a specific topic or a specific, I think we call them, I'm trying to remember. Lost my place. A fundamental principle is what we call them in the resource. So something, you might have a hole. So this is a good year to be identifying those and working on creating a policy and a procedure for those. So I created a policies and procedures document that we released on Monday. So I'm actually going to share my screen and bring it up, and we'll go through that on this presentation. So what is a policy? It's a document where fundamental principles are outlined that need to be followed at your organization. So the policy outlines the what and the why of the principle or topic that the policy is on. What is a procedure? So a procedure is a document that accompanies a policy, which outlines how the policy will be implemented and who will be part of the process. Not all policies need a procedure, but usually a procedure follows a policy. So we'll go through what the components of policy are. So there's the purpose statement, which is where you introduce the topic of the policy and why the policy has been created. There's a scope statement, which states who the policy applies to. And there's a main purpose statement that expounds upon the policy topic to include, so date of implementation, the people responsible for enforcing the policy. So if it's the board or if you have a staff person, what is that? Consequences of non-compliance, and you can refer to the procedure or any applicable legislation in there. The components of a procedure are basically just the main purpose statement. It has a similar, introduction, but the main purpose statement outlines the process for how the policy will be implemented, by who, and any actions that occur. It'll also outline who and where those actions will take place within that. So there, we've outlined a process for creating a policy or procedure. It's a 3-step process. So there's prepare, draft, and finalize. So we'll go into that. So for preparing, there's 2 pieces of that. That's the planning and the research phases. So the planning phase is really important. So say you decide today that you're going to start a policy and you want it implemented September 1st when your programming starts. So you're going to want to create a timeline from where the implementation date is backwards to ensure that you have enough time and the proper people in place to create that policy. Another big piece of that is researching your topic. Look at what other organizations are doing. Look what other skating clubs have. Look at what other sports organizations have. You don't have to recreate the wheel a lot of times. A lot of times there's good language. There could be specific things at your club or skating school that you need to include, but there's a lot of really great policies out there, so you don't have to start from scratch. The important thing here is that good, effective, and inclusive policies take time to create. It's not something you want to, there may be an issue that comes up and you have to create a policy. It's a reactionary policy or procedure that comes up. And a lot of times those tend to be limited in scope and actually exclude versus inclusion, versus include a lot of people. So it's really important to ensure that there's enough planning time. And obviously in those cases where you create a reactionary policy, it might be a good idea to review that after the situation has occurred to make sure that the process there makes sense for something outside of that situation. So it's making sure that you're looking back, but also that planning phase and the research phase, it's going to take time. It's not something that can be created overnight. So that's the first step for you guys when you're creating a policy. The second step is drafting. So once you've done your research, you have to organize your research, right? So creating an outline, you really liked this piece from this policy and this piece from this policy. So really just creating an outline and then processing it and starting that first draft of language. This is a really good time to consult with, maybe you have some key members at your club who they've given you feedback on something that was missing in a policy or something like that. So it's good to engage maybe your members. It's good to engage your full board. A lot of times your board potentially are the ones who are creating the policy, but it might just be a certain group of the board. So getting feedback from your board, and then potentially too, depending on the topic of your policy, it could be beneficial for you to reach out to some professionals, so an HR professional or anybody like that who might be able to give you a little bit of feedback on it and just making sure that it's inclusive. And so like this phase may take a couple rounds. You create the initial draft, you might get feedback, then you have to create another draft. So this may take time. So making sure in that planning phase, you have time allotted for feedback and multiple drafting periods. And then the last step in this process would be the finalize phase. So you've come to a draft that everyone is happy with, you guys are happy with. The next step would be to get the approval from your board. So once you have the board meeting, they approve it, So now you have to implement it at your club. So as Claire was saying, right, making sure that you have updated contact information, because it would be beneficial for you to, email your members saying, hey, we have this new policy. If it's mid-season, hey, we have this new policy, read it, understand it, know that this is going to be in effect as of whatever date. We are recommending that your policies and procedures be housed somewhere for accessibility from your members. So on a website, on your Facebook page, something like that, where they are able to access those documents. And a good one to do is also include it with registration. I know we had spoken about online registration last week, and I know that Uplifter has the ability to add policies so that the people registering, they can accept or acknowledge that, hey, this policy is in place at the club, and they have to acknowledge that before they can process the registration. So it's just a little bit of due diligence for you guys to ensure that your members know what the expectations are at your club. And as Claire said, communication is key here. Having that consistent message out and those expectations ahead of time are really, really important for your members. This year, especially, but in any year, in any skating year. So some interesting policies to consider potentially implementing. You may have them already at your club, but some ones that we are recommending clubs consider implementing would be, so some board policies, something like a conflict of interest, a confidentiality, a code of conduct. Those types of policies are relatively standard across boards of directors in the non-for-profit sector and beyond. So something to consider. I can let you know that this is something that we have on our radar, and we'll be working on providing some sample language, some sample templates, that type of thing, on kind of your conflict of interest, your code, your confidentiality, and some potential codes of conduct. So watch for those in the coming months. Another area of policies that you may want to consider having are some financial policies. So that's stuff like who can sign checks, cash handling, those types of things. One that's going to be important for this season specifically is going to be your refund policy. This should be created and implemented prior to registering your members so that they know the expectations of what is going to happen this season should they not be skating or something like that. Some situations you should consider including in your refund policy are if a program is canceled by the local public health unit, right? So if they say, hey, we can't run programming right now, that's something to consider including as a refund issue or a refund topic within your policy. If programming is canceled because your facility closes, that's another one. And then potentially if the club themselves cancels programs and can't provide the service that the people have registered for. So those are three situations to consider, including in your refund policy. Another thing to consider would be, sorry, dry throat, would be a refund versus a credit. And that's something individual to each club or skating school. So that's something to consider when you're creating this policy. The important piece out of all of this is that you are laying the expectations out before anyone commits to registration for the year. It's really important, sorry, that those expectations are out front. It will help to hopefully eliminate any type of complaints or issues that could arise if expectations are not clear at the beginning. Another set of potential policies to look at are your organizational or program policies. One that I'll touch on here that we want to encourage everyone to have is a complaint and dispute resolution policy and procedure. I do know that Skate Canada is currently in their final stages of updating all of their safe sport related documents, and the complaint and dispute resolution portion of that falls under that safe sport umbrella. So once they have released that and it's in implementation for all of you, We at Skate Ontario will then be updating our policies to align with Skate Canada. And this is something that we will also work to create language or a template or something for you guys so that your policy, there's a linear process between clubs, then they can come to Skate Ontario, then they come to Skate Canada. So making sure that that process is linear and makes sense. So that's something that will be coming. Once Skate Canada has released that stuff, we will then be working to create that for you guys. So that's a lot of the document that goes into that. I'm just gonna go to the very end and show you guys sample outline framework, that type of thing of what a policy should look like at your club. It's a good idea to have a template and all of your policies look the same. All of your procedures look the same. So there's consistency across the board. So there's policy name, policy number, document classification. So if it's a policy versus a procedure, you could also use this potentially for, say, a job description. If you have, president, treasurer, secretary, those types of things, if there's any job descriptions needed for, coaching roles, this is another good template that you could also use for that. Obviously, if you refer to your policy in your bylaws, include that here. If there's any legislation that prompted you to create this policy, add it here. If there's a related procedure, you can always add that there. Sorry. A big thing to note here is this document control piece. So there's the implementation date and the next review date by the board. So implementation is when it takes effect, and the next one is the review by the board. We recommend that you are reviewing your policies at minimum every 3 years. Every year, every other year would be better, right? Things change, circumstances change at your club from year to year. So it's important to be reviewing those and updating them when that happens. So if there is an update, that'll be the new implementation date, and then you will change the review date. And something else to note on here would be this disclaimer at the bottom of the screen. So this helps to ensure that members are referencing the most up-to-date version of your document. And that loops back to, having a central located place on your website, on your Facebook page, whatever you guys use to house your documents so that members can always go back and see the most up-to-date version. Because sometimes people print them off. You as board members may print yours off just so you have a physical reference, but it's important to make sure that that's included, just to make sure that somebody may have a complaint, but it's from an old policy. We've updated that. Here's the new process. So it's important to make sure that those are updated. Yeah, and at the end of the day, this policies and procedures are here to help your club and your skating school run effectively, and making sure that the members know the expectations when they sign up. So yeah, that's it from me. Is there any questions, Sharon?
No, I don't have any questions in there, but we can give a few seconds to see if anybody has anything else after they've processed what you've said.
Perfect.
There was a couple questions in there that we did answer as you spoke, but a little bit unrelated to the policy piece.
Perfect. Is there any other just general questions anybody else wants to ask?
Perfect. Okay, so if anything comes up, we can stop, but I'll give you a quick heads up to what's going to happen next week. So next week I call the good stuff because we're going to talk about club programming as we start planning for the fall. So the mission is to cover the delivery requirement standards for CanSkate. We're going to talk about session options on the ice and some resources that will be available that we're going to provide, and a quick update on assessment days as we move forward. So that's what's in store for next week. And so I can touch on this quick. So the 50, so this is a, excuse me. So as I talked about at the beginning, we're working on the return to play protocols with the guidelines that the provincial government has brought out. It'll take us a bit of time, so we're planning to have those out for Friday. So you'll have an update Friday with those questions, Lisa.
Sharon, I actually have another question, and it's easier to voice it than type it. Yesterday,
worries.
we were on a call with the representative from one of the hockey organizations, one of the big hockey organizations. And the question is regarding this bubble, if and when we get there. They're saying that the bubble has to consist of the same kids and coaches. So let's just take CanSkate for a second. If I teach 40 CanSkate kids in a 1 hour session, I can then not continue to teach the next hour. Is that true?
So right now, we don't have 40 on the ice, right? We have still at 10, and I'm going to leave this to Lisa because she's going to be able to give us the best answer for this.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Oh, she's still muted.
I keep unmuting myself, so people keep pushing the button. We're all trying to unmute me at the same time. So Lisa, I would ask you to hold on that. The piece, we just got the actual written copy of that legislation yesterday. It's actually being looked at, it's being reviewed by our lawyer right now. And I can tell you that this stuff about that hockey is referring to, about the leagues and the group sizes, it is so confusing that we actually have a call with all of our questions going to the minister on Friday. So I just, all of that clarification stuff, I can tell you, I think the good news is that we're going ahead. The bad news is that for now, it's like really confusing. So we are working, we will get you those answers, but it will take us a few days, I think, to sort that stuff out.
Thank you, Lisa. Is there any other questions before we let you guys go for the afternoon? All right, perfect. On behalf of myself and Melissa and Claire, thank you for coming today, and we hope to see you next week.